Hi, and welcome to Transparent with Tina, a holistic approach for mental, physical, and spiritual well being so you can become the best version of yourself. Welcome to Transparent with Tina. I have an amazing guest today, Michaela Wilson with Aries Tech. Today, we're going to be talking all about EMFs, which I can't wait to get into this. Welcome, welcome,
Thank you
welcome,
so
Michaela.
much. Thanks for having me.
So excited to have this conversation because you know what? Everybody has heard about EMFs, and blocking them. We're going to get into that later. What is the best way for us to stay healthy with all this going on? But I want to hear how you got into it to begin with. Okay. How did you even get started in this business?
Yeah. It actually really goes back to my mother. Funny enough, she was a nurse for over 20 years, and she was a labor and delivery nurse and a trauma nurse. And she ended up getting diagnosed. She had two open heart surgeries after I was born and then got diagnosed with MS. And she ended up going a completely different route, a more holistic route, and like curing herself of MS, which they say you can't do. But she has had no
Woo!
symptoms of MS since for many years, almost 30 years.
Wow. I
So
love to hear that.
yeah, so she's really kind of paved the way for my own, understanding of how to take care of your body and how to heal. And she was always telling me about EMF, but it was one of those things where it was just very out of sight, out of mind. And I think even like as a young kid, everything that she would tell me was just kind of like eye roll. It's like
Right.
I would, yeah, but until I got really sick. So I ended up having my wisdom teeth removed when I was like 17 years old, and I had a fissure. They left basically a hole connected to my nasal cavity. And when they went to
Mm.
go fill that, they ended up closing in a chronic sinus infection. So I was getting really sick. Like I was a dancer at the time, and I couldn't really dance because I would like black out from just this chronic infection. And so eventually that led me to really pay attention to what she was saying on the health side. So what was I putting in my body? What was I putting on my body? I cut out sugar completely from my diet when I was a senior in high school, and like
Wow.
saw the results of the impact of not drinking when you're 17 and all of that stuff.
Wow.
um so anyway, so I really was aware of what I put on my skin, what I put in my body. Those things are really easy to measure.
Yep.
um I wasn't aware of EMF, and I wasn't really interested in EMF because it was very out of sight, out of mind, and there were just so many other things to worry about.
Yeah.
Until I had my first son. So when I had my first son, I ate all organic. I did all of the things during my pregnancy with him. Had him at home, and then ended up being rushed to the hospital. And I was in the hospital with him for about 6 weeks, and he had something called jejunal atresia, which is no middle intestine. So he had an upper intestine and a lower intestine, and no path through. And whenever I was speaking with the surgeon, he basically just said, this happens within the first couple weeks of gestation. And that's really all he gave me, was just like, it happens sometimes. And for me, it's like, I really, and I know that you always go through that as a parent when something happens with your kid, of like, what did I do wrong? Like what
Yeah.
happened here?
Yeah.
Like, I thought I did everything right.
Yeah.
And that's not to shame. And I do think things just happen, but there is a biological reason for things. And I was really trying to figure out what that was. So in my deep dive of that, that's where I got led to EMF. I can never make the claim that that's what happened. But what I do know is that I was sleeping in about a 200 square foot apartment with my Wi-Fi router plugged into my bed in the first couple weeks of my pregnancy. I ended up moving when I was about 3 months pregnant. But I was sleeping next to my Wi-Fi router in that beginning period. And it was really the only thing that made sense to me as what could have happened.
Hmm.
But like I said, I'll never be able to prove it. That's totally anecdotal in my own experience. But it did make me very aware that this is a more serious problem and a more serious thing to consider than I thought before. Like, it is so easy to not think about it because it is so out of sight, out of mind, unless you're super hypersensitive, which is a very real thing. I've talked to a lot of people who have like an actual syndrome called electromagnetic hypersensitivity. And they can tell when your phone is on in your pocket. Like, they can tell you when you walked into the room and your phone is on, and it's acknowledged by the WHO. It's a real syndrome. And I didn't have like that crazy level of impact, but I definitely like started to really notice, and then just finding out how vulnerable children are. And, so my path just started like, the rabbit hole began. And then I started trying everything. I did like the grounding blankets. I did the Faraday cages on my phone and on my Wi-Fi routers, Faraday cages on the smart meters.
What is a Faraday cage?
So a Faraday cage is usually the first thing people will try when they're starting to research like what to do about EMF. And a Faraday cage is technically supposed to like block the signal, or at least slow down the signal depending on the level of Faraday you have. But it's like a metal cage that can go over your Wi-Fi router and like slow down or stop the signal. It isn't working efficiently if your Wi-Fi is working efficiently. Like it's not if your Wi-Fi router is continuing to work efficiently, then it's not really, it should be blocking EMF completely. So I just unplug my Wi-Fi at night and do things like that. They have the like bags of rocks. They have all different types of things that I explored and tried. And then I realized that it was kind of like a never ending target. Like trying to block EMF in this world is impossible. We are surrounded by it all the time. I mean, you can put a Faraday cage on your Wi-Fi and you can put a Faraday cage on your phone, but in a lot of cases that's going to make your phone output even more power, because it's trying to its whole job
it's trying to do its job,
make a connection. To make a connection. So those cases we put on our phone, any hole that case has, there's going to be power just amplified coming out of those areas, because that's what the product is designed to do. It's designed to find a connection. So if it's not finding a connection, it's going to amplify its power and its reach. So I tried everything, and then I came across Aries as a customer. Yeah.
Let me ask you a question. Those jackets that you put on the phone, so are you telling me that because it's trying to get the signal, it's actually almost working in reverse, because it's trying to emit that and it's going to be emitting more power through it?
Yeah, like if there's any open areas on the case that you put on your phone, there's going to be amplified amount of power coming out of that area.
Wow.
And people who are super hypersensitive. So I love telling this guy's story, because I ended up starting a whole podcast about this. So I've interviewed a lot of different researchers and people with hypersensitivity. And there was this guy named Mike Bender, and he was not like the typical, like he wasn't the typical health person. He wasn't really looking for those types of nuances that we look for as like a biohacker or something like that. We're always looking for ways to support our health. He wasn't really like that. He was just kind of an average guy. And he had really bad mold exposure, which activated Lyme disease from a tick bite that he got when he was 9 years old. And then all of a sudden, he was a writer, screenplay writer and a children's book author. And all of a sudden, he couldn't like put his hands on anything. Like if he put his hands on a computer or a phone, like the signals would just start like running through it. And can tell, like they play a game with he'll play a game with his wife where like she'll have her phone on or off in her pocket or behind her, and he will be able to tell. It's crazy, but it's also really real. I talked to the president of the Environmental Health Trust, who is one of the largest advocates for EMF safety. He has an incredible background. We can get into him. He's amazing, but he was saying that throughout all of the research he was doing, he was realizing how real hypersensitivity was. And then I had just had the conversation with Mike Bender, which was just a personal story, which is all anecdotal, but it was like, oh, that was interesting to hear, that this person's experience that he's having in his life is actually validated through research.
Right.
But anyway, he would say that he tried everything, and that like whenever he put the Faraday cages like on his phone and stuff, like he would feel an intense amount of power coming from those areas. So yeah, it's not always like it can be hell. I think there's always a situation for everything. There's a situation or a circumstance where it's better, it's good to block, it's good to reduce, it's good to mitigate, harmonize, whatever. But ultimately where I came to was realizing that like, okay, there was a lot of things at this point, like in 2020, that everybody was advocating for and everybody was fighting for. And I think they were all important things. What I realized about EMF was that like, okay, we're all advocating and fighting for all of these things, but a lot of these things we have a choice in, whether it felt like we had a choice or didn't have a choice, or, we had a choice in the matter. We can choose what kind of water we drink, what kind of, glass we drink it out of. We can choose what kind of food we eat. We can choose what kind of supplements we take. We can choose what kind of treatment what kind of treatment we want our children to have. And, with all the AMAs and all the things that happen. But I'm just saying in general, like we can choose what goes in our body, what goes on our body, things like that. Right. And with EMF, I realized it was something that we really never had a choice in. It was something that just kind of happened. Like while we were advocating for all of these things, like cell towers just went up every couple 100 feet, and every neighborhood has multiple of them. People have them outside their apartment buildings. People sleep in apartment buildings with 25 smart meters on the outside of the wall, which is like, what feeds back to electrical companies through wireless connection, what kind of usage you had. But if you live, I put this video out about that, about, hey, like make sure you don't have all of the smart meters from the entire apartment complex on the outside of your apartment, because that happens. And one of my really good friends sent me a video, and she was
had
that
them
apartment.
all on the outside of her apartment. Because
so
it's all going into her apartment.
Exactly. And then she put a Faraday blanket. So Faraday blanket is like basically this blanket that's made out of these small metal particles to block the EMF. But she put it on the outside of her house, like on the outside or of the apartment outside of the smart meters. I'm like, well, now you just have it all bouncing off, pushing right back into your building.
Right.
So, yeah. And I don't say that to like induce fear, because if you really start getting into it, it can be really scary when you start realizing like, oh, this is everywhere.
Yeah.
But it did make me really start looking for something that was going to help actually give our body the resources it needs to contend with the modern world, because it wasn't something that was you can't walk around in a Faraday bubble. And I really was questioning like the Faraday clothes, because like, we have our own electromagnetic field. It's a very, very low hertz. Every cell in our body has an electrical frequency. So when you're putting a, Faraday hat on a baby, are you also messing with their own biological flow, like their own electrical field? So I was always really skeptical of those types of things as well. And then found out about Aries, and I was skeptical of them when I first found out about them. And I did try it anecdotally, had my own feelings about it. I really felt like my migraines decreased by a lot. I was getting really bad migraines. And then I had an experience where I took my necklace off and had a phone call with my sister. I totally forgot I took it off. I took it off and sat in my bathroom. And I had this hour and a half long phone conversation with my sister where we just got really lost in conversation. And I didn't realize that I was sitting in the living room next to my Wi-Fi router. And then that evening I ended up with the worst migraine of my life. I was in the bathroom, head into my knees, lights off, no one talked to me. And I was like, what the heck? What is different? I haven't had these in so long. And then got out of the shower and saw my necklace sitting on the bathroom counter. And I was like, wow. So then I started wanting to know more. Yeah. So then I wanted to start to know more. And I had the CEO on my podcast, an old podcast that I had called Answer All My Questions, about the history of Aries and really what it was doing, and how their focus was always on the biological impact and supporting the biological impact of EMF rather than blocking EMF. And it really just blew my mind. And then I just kept knocking on their door, I want to do more with you guys. I want to help spread this message, And then I started the podcast and the blog, The Wave Forward, which is all about education on EMF. And then eventually became Aries creative director.
Wow.
Just kept knocking.
Your podcast is called The Wave Forward?
Yes.
Awesome.
WAVE.
Yes.
I
love the title. It makes perfect sense. Okay. So you've been the creative director for how long now?
A little, a year and a half, maybe.
Okay. So I have a couple questions. So you've sent me some product. Okay. And actually I have the one right here, which I love the way it looks too. This is for this covers how many square feet?
It's I think 193 square foot in diameter. Okay. So divide that by 2 and it would be all around you, up, down, side to side. It's basically it makes a bubble.
Okay, perfect. So if I'm on my computer, this I have no problem because it's sitting right here, right?
Yeah.
And you've got the necklace. Why don't you show everybody the necklace that you're wearing? Because you sent me one of those too, okay? And then you sent me one for the back of the phone. All right.
Yeah.
So my question to you is, okay, we've already talked about the first one. That covers so many square feet. The phone is obvious. What about so the necklace? Okay, so if you're not wearing, because I emailed you a little bit ago saying I don't know if I'm going to wear the necklace, but now I'm thinking I maybe am going to wear the necklace. You know,
That's funny.
would- do th- I guess you need to have it on you, right? Because regardless if I'm on my phone or not, you're saying basically it's everywhere, right? So if you're not wearing the necklace, then you're really, so that creates in itself a bubble. The
Yeah,
necklace.
so there's different like products for different things. So you have the Life Tune one, which I have on my phone here. Um there's like a little button basically.
Yeah.
And that helps modulate the frequencies that are on the device itself. It has to be in really close proximity to the device because of how small the silicon resonator chip is. So to really work like optimally, it needs to be like on a computer or on a Wi-Fi router or on a phone.
Okay.
For the larger devices like the Go and the Flex, so the Go is a portable device that I use for my kids. That's a little bit smaller than this version. And some people prefer it because of how it's a little bit smaller, but I have necklaces made for my kids, and then I also will have just clip-on keychains onto their backpack and send it to school because then it protects like you have the personal. I prefer, like, if I was going to say, start with anything, I would always say start with personal protection, because then no matter where you are, you're good. If it's like you're trying to protect or support like an entire family, and you're trying to look for what's the best way to go about that, I would say go with like the more space protection, which is like the larger one, the Zone Max that you have.
That
And
I
we're
have.
doing some really fun stuff. I remember, I don't even know if I was working for Aries at the time or if I was just kind of contracted to, I was making content and helping share the story, because I had a very deep understanding of EMF at that point and a really big passion for it. And it was kind of hard to find people who had both a marketing background and education on EMF. So I kind of came in and was just like, please let me participate here, because it is one of the things that about working with Aries is that you really do have to understand what we're doing.
Yeah.
Like, we have a very, very small team, super small
How
team,
small?
large company. There's like 10 of us that's like running the marketing side. We're also a publicly funded company, so there's a lot of other organizations that are involved in things like that, and our research team and all of that. But like internally, it's a very small team, and that's because like finding people that don't not only have the background but also have the passion and the understanding for the vision and like what we're really doing, and taking the time to understand the product, because it's not an easy thing to just understand.
Yeah.
It took me a
Right.
long time to like really feel confident in like how I speak about it. And even to this day, I'm not like a scientist. So I, struggle with the scientific terminology and the physics and like all of that. But having seen the results myself on heart rate variability and brain scan, like EEG brain scans, and seeing that in real time on real people live really does like solidify something in your brain.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's just, the team is super small, and they're all really passionate about the vision of Aries, which is awesome, and it's growing exponentially. But what I was saying about the larger products is, whenever I was talking to the CEO one day, I was sitting in a coffee shop and I looked over at the door and I saw, how they have like, we have free Wi-Fi sticker, like little stickers that'll say like, we have free Wi-Fi on the doors. And I was like, man, wouldn't it be so cool if there was like a database of like EMF friendly spaces, so like you could look up restaurants and coffee shops and like all of that, and just go find these spaces who are supporting the tech environment.
Yes.
Because I'm really big on like, okay, well, we clean our air, we
Yeah.
clean our water,
Yeah.
why wouldn't we also clean our tech environment?
Exactly.
So that has really taken off. We have like the first ever arena went EMF friendly, the Timberwolves arena in Minnesota. The Target Center went EMF friendly, so they incorporated Aries in every Wi-Fi point on the major concourses where people are walking and shopping and all of that. Some gyms where our UFC fighters train went EMF friendly. The first functional medicine clinic restaurant, the tallow seed oil free restaurant in California went EMF friendly. So it's just kind of, it's expanding,
It's
and
just an
yeah,
extension of your
yeah.
well-being. Because you know what? It's like I just had this conversation the other day, and it's like I have friends that go, I could never do what you do. I spend most of my money on supplements. It's just ridiculous. It's first of all, it's ridiculous that I should have to spend that much money on supplements to combat the air, to combat what's in our food and everything. You know what I'm saying? It's not
Mm.
like, you know, how the soil and what they're putting in the air now, the EMFs. And this makes so much sense to me. Let me ask you a question. There's a lot of them out there, and there was a necklace that was gifted to me, and it was much smaller than yours. What is the difference between? Because there's a lot of them out there, a lot of the necklaces. What's the difference between that and Aries?
Mm. To be honest, I can't really speak into all of them because I haven't seen them or looked at all of their research. But I know that for me personally, whenever I was looking into this, and this is advice I would give to anybody, especially just like a mom who doesn't have a scientific background, who's trying to do the best thing for their kids. Like, there's so much noise in like, it's a fad, the wellness fad. And
Yeah.
it's a multi-billion dollar, multi-million dollar industry. And we are being sold new kinds of supplements and new red light therapies and, all of these things. And a
Yeah.
lot of it is really valid, but it's like, how do you know what's the best? What's the
Yes.
most, thing? And so one thing I always say to look for, and this is what I had looked for, and that's why I had chose Aries, was first like the history and the background and how long has the company been around. And then, they have independent studies? Okay, that's great. But did they have peer reviewed independent studies? And then one level beyond that is like peer reviewed and published in independent journals. So that means that like, not only was it peer reviewed, but in the process of it being published in a journal, they also have their own peer review that happens before they'll publish in the journal to make sure it's credible. So I always look for peer review and published research, and that was something that Aries had. And when I had that conversation with the CEO, that really solidified, okay, I feel confident in telling people about this, and I feel confident in supporting this, was like their history. They started as a foundation over 30 years ago. And they were working on a technology they were planning on selling to the European military because people who were working on travel radio signal towers were reporting really bad symptoms. So they were like, they had a team of researchers and inventors, and they knew about this phenomenon of being able to kind of use this like holography to create a more bio-friendly field. And so they basically were just going to sell it to the military. And then whenever iPhone started coming out and things like that, the son of the father who was part of that foundation was like, Dad, we have a solution. We should bring it to the public. And so then they made it a consumer product. So I think that's really important because the research came first, and it came before it was a fad. Like
Right.
it came before it was like, oh, people are fearful of this. Let's create a product.
Right. Right.
And I'm all for like solving problems. Like I think that's great that people are looking to solve problems, but it just in my own like, trying to figure out what do I do as a mom for my kids, that's the kind of things I look for, is not
Right.
just independent, not just third party, but peer reviewed and published.
Do you have do your kids wear the necklace too? I know you said you have a one for their backpack for school, but do they wear the necklace?
They sometimes will. To be honest, they're really young. They're 4 and 6,
Mhm.
so they don't like having things around their neck. But
Right.
they will sometimes. Like if they're like watching a movie, like I won't let them like hold an iPad in their lap. That's like the worst thing you could do. Like
Really?
laptops are like, it's the worst that you could, like, sitting it on your lap. It's just basically connecting you to that signal, and you're like
Oh
plugged
my
in
God, I
basically.
do that all the
Oh,
time.
I did it all the time too, but I won't let them do that. But anyway, so when we go out in like major cities, or if we're traveling, I'll ask that they wear it like at the airports or anything like that. But normally I'll just clip it on their backpack for school, and that's good enough.
That's good enough because it
Because
creates
it's
kind of
close
like
by.
a
Yeah.
bubble. Okay. So, and then
And their teachers are like super into it now, which is
oh,
nice.
I bet. I bet. No, I think this is a movement, and I think it's so necessary. When you said what would some symptoms be if you're getting too much exposure? So if yeah, just broad.
Okay, so like super simple ones are like heating sensations. Like, you know, a lot of people have that. I have that 100%. I cannot hold a cell phone to my ear.
No.
And there is a couple different things happening. You have like that low level EMF, but you also have like the like a heating effect, which is a little bit different. Like a lot of the testing that's done for regulations on cell phones is the SAR testing, which is like the absorption rate. Basically, it's the heating effect that happens when you hold your phone to your head. But when they do those tests, they're doing them with like mannequins, basically, like these like human mannequins are doing on adult like replicas of humans, and they're not considering like the tissues and the nerves and like all of this stuff. So, and they're not considering children have thinner skulls, they have a lot more absorbent tissues, they're a lot more at risk, because you have to think a lot of the research that's out there, which there is a ton of research out there. I know people like to say that there's not enough. We could definitely have the argument that there's not enough research on 5G because 5G is very new, but there is a ton of research on low levels EMF. So like back when we had 1G, 2G phones, 900 megahertz, super low level EMF. There's research saying that it was like significant rates of tumors in rats, and they have a lot of different things going on there. Thousands. And like of the thousands of studies, almost 90% of them show significant biological harm if they're not owned by or not studies done by telecommunication companies.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So anyway, just
And like my son, he's 21, his phone is attached to him and it's in his pocket. Okay. And I understand that can cause testicle cancer or make you infertile. I mean, it makes total sense. But if he has the little button on the back and he's carrying it in his pocket, would that protect him from that?
It would definitely help. Yeah.
It will help, but it's not. Yeah.
Like, you know, holding things in your hand is like another thing too. That's why I like the personal protection, because really what Aries doesn't block EMF. It's not like messing with the signal necessarily, as much as it's helping give your body the boost that it needs to contend with what's happening. And you can see it live in like EEG brain scans, heart rate variability. Like I've seen it where you can, so when we were saying like, what are the symptoms? Like brain fog, it definitely like induces stress. And we see this on brain scans. Like we've had third-party neuroscientists do live demonstrations who understand what the different areas of the brain mean. And we do these tests where you'll sit there. So you'll do baseline, which is just like 5 minutes baseline. What does your brain activity look like just on the regular in ambient EMF? So this is not like a super controlled. This is not, we don't consider these experiments or studies. These are just live demonstrations. So it's ambient EMF. Like we are always in ambient EMF. So it's like, what's your baseline just in general?
Yeah.
And then what's your brain scan look like after 5 minutes talking on the phone? And the amount of people who have like a spike in like the areas of the brain that that contributed to depression, anxiety, stress, lack of focus, all of those areas are like super activated.
Yeah,
and
it's got to jack up your central nervous system.
Yes, I would say that's a really big piece of it, is like brain fog, headaches, lack of focus,
anxiety, like you said. Yeah.
And then like heating sensations. And there's if you look up hypersensitivity, there's just such a wide range of symptoms, because really what's happening is like people, I always think about it as like, it's one piece of a really toxic environment. And we all have, Dr. Jill Carnahan, who is an environmental toxicity expert, functional medicine doctor. And I interviewed her, and she was talking about these like buckets that we have. We have these capacity buckets of the ability to contain and to, let go of toxins. And everyone's born with a different bucket capacity, depending on your genes, depending on your environment. And so she's like, what she thinks is happening with EMF and why people will just be fine one day. This happened to my sister. My sister was completely fine. She got her gallbladder well, she wasn't completely fine in that context, but like she got her gallbladder removed, and then now is like 100% confident she's EMF sensitive. because she has like heating sensation in her face. She can feel like the tingling in her arms when she holds her phone. She gets like really bad brain fog. She gets headaches really bad when she's using her tech a lot. But yeah, so just there's so much that I could go into, but
yeah, we could talk about this forever. But let me ask you, you were also talking about it's not about blocking it. So that's what you're saying. You're basically raising your electromagnetic field within your body with your products, correct?
Yeah, I always use the analogy of like a tuning fork. Some people don't know what a tuning fork is, but have you heard of a tuning fork?
Yeah.
So if you like hit a tuning fork and then you strum a guitar string beside that tuning fork, that guitar string is going to eventually vibrate at the same frequency that tuning fork is vibrating at.
Right.
And a lot of the pushback that we get, or that I get when I try to have this conversation with people, is that like, well, how can you change how your body's responding to the frequencies without changing the message that's encoded on it? And when you really start looking into like what is an electromagnetic field or what is an electromagnetic frequency, there's all of these different parts of an electromagnetic frequency. There's like the modulation, there's the phase, there's the wavelength, there's like all of these different pieces. And another analogy that I would use is like auto tune. Like I can sing a song and I could, have the lyrics and I could be so off pitch. And I could use auto tune to like make my pitch perfect and to make it beautiful sounding without changing what I'm saying.
Right.
And that's really what Aries is doing. It's changing how your body is listening to those frequencies, for lack of a better term. And you can see, so what I never finished with the EEG brain scan. So we did the 5 minutes, you see all of these activations in all these areas associated with these, depression, anxiety, stress. And then we do another 5 minutes talking on the phone, live phone call, same way we did before with Aries present. And their brain scan looks like it did in baseline.
Interesting. So it just evened everything out.
Yeah. It's wild.
It's
wild.
Crazy. That's amazing. So you don't have a product though that like does the whole house.
It's like creating a field within that environment that's going to be more biologically friendly. It's not canceling. And if you did cancel frequencies, you wouldn't be able to use your tech. Like if you were actually truly blocking electromagnetic frequencies,
then you wouldn't be able to use your phone or your computer or anything else. Okay. So a couple of tips. One, don't use your laptop, even if you have your product on the laptop, or you still shouldn't be using that on your.
I mean, I would like I said before, like I think just doing everything you can, like this is a piece of a really big
to
problem.
Keep it as far away as you can from you. Right?
I don't like to keep things on my body. I try to, still use speakerphone on my phone because there's the heating effect that you have to consider. So heating is different than electromagnetic frequencies. The heat can kill cells, and that's like very well known. Just to put a little perspective. So the SAR test, the specific absorption rate is what they base all of the regulations off of. Our regulations on cell phone use, on anything involving EMF, are over 26 years old. And so there's all of this new research on the impact of EMF that hasn't been evaluated by the FCC, who is the regulatory body that decides regulations for EMF. They've been sued. They were sued back in 2021 by the Environmental Health Trust and Children's Health Defense, who was ran by Robert Kennedy Jr., and they lost that lawsuit. They actually lost, and they were told they needed to go back and they need to look at all of the research and create new regulations. The problem with that lawsuit is there was no time frame, so they still haven't done it. So now what they're doing is
hold on a second.
They are. You good?
I have to cut that section out because I'm just getting over COVID. I took some cough medicine, but I have this little bit of okay. So think about where you left off. My son's going to have to edit that part. I started coughing.
Thanks,
sorry.
No, you're good.
I got it out. Go ahead.
Yeah, so the FCC regulations are over 26 years old, And they were sued by the Children's Health Defense and the Environmental Health Trust, and they lost the lawsuit. But what happened was that even though they lost the lawsuit and it was acknowledged that they have not been actively paying attention to the latest research or establishing accurate regulations, there was no time frame on when they would need to do that by. So they lost in 2021. They still haven't done anything. So now what's coming back around, like the Children's Health Defense the Children's Health Defense and the Environmental Health Trust are coming to them on, it's called 704 No More. And so what 704 is, it's a section in the Telecommunications Act of 1996 that they added in Section 704, basically saying people don't have the right to fight cell towers based on health or environmental concerns. So if you have if you're a beekeeper and someone puts a cell tower up, by your farm and your bees start to die, you don't have the right to fight that. Or if someone I can't remember his last name, but Scott from the Environmental Health or from the Children's Health Defense, he's the lawyer who's been working directly with Robert Kennedy Jr. I had lunch with him and Mary Holland, who's the head of the Children's Health Defense, and he travels all around the globe helping people fight cell towers and helping people sue because they've had serious health concerns. Like someone had a cell tower go up outside of their house and ended up having multiple strokes back to back right after it went live. And so he's fighting this section because he basically is just wanting them to remove 704 and let people start being able to sue or start being able to fight these cell towers that are going up in school playgrounds and on side of school grounds. And parents don't know. There have been a lot of parents who have fought on this. Even one of my sister actually in Montana, the whole group was able to stop a cell tower from going up. The best way to stop a cell tower is complaining about real estate. Unfortunately, you can't really do a whole lot about health. Schools are a little bit easier because you can get parents to sign a petition, and if enough people sign, you should be able to stop. But most of the time, if you see, you should be informed if a cell tower is going up near you, and if one is, the best way to fight it is through saying that your real estate, your property value will drop.
Oh, that's where it's coming. That's where it's going. That's exactly where it's going. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. God, my head is just spinning right now. It's okay,
I know.
No, but I'm loving this conversation because, we all know about it, but we don't know, how severe it is. And, just for example, holistic health, right? How many times have I heard, well, if that were true, my doctor would know? No. That's not, it's not necessarily true. You have to do your own research, or if that was true, it'd be all over the news. And you know what? It's just not so. I mean, I'm a firm believer that you have to do your own research on everything. And that, God gave us an intuition for a reason. And if, I remember when I had breast cancer, they wanted me to do radiation and my intuition said no. And thank God I didn't. I just really went, that's when I took a deep dive in holistic medicine, and I did the alkaline diet and ate 80% alkaline, 20% acidic. And that was in 2011 and never did it. So, I think we really do need to, and especially our children who are glued to the phone. So for example, like I said, my son who's 21, if he has that on his phone, but he probably should be wearing that around his neck too. So when he goes out too, right? Yeah.
Yeah. But having it on his phone is going to help a lot because it's still you having it near your body is still going to support your response to all the EMF around you.
Right.
Yeah. So I feel like I still will unplug my Wi-Fi at night. And, I am all about not living in fear and just making the best choice possible to you in every moment.
Do what you can do and leave the rest. I mean, because, you can't control everything, but do what you can control, right? To make your life.
Yeah. And
but you do. My brother does that too. I should probably start doing that. Unplug the router every night.
It's so easy. It's so easy. And the reason I do that, people will say, I had someone say this to me, why do you need to do that if you have Aries and Aries, works the way it does? And I'm like, okay, well, I've seen the brain scan results. And what I realized is that this is actually supporting my own biological field. So if I can reduce the amount of noise when I'm trying to sleep at night, I'm now giving my body this chance to recover and restore with the help of Aries. Because I'll keep Aries beside my bed. There's an Aries in every single one of our bedrooms. And I swear that my kids sleep so much better since I put one in their room. But yeah, so I'm like, well, I want to give my body the best chance it can at night to restore and recover.
Yes.
We are resting. So the Schumann resonance is like the 7 point, I can't remember exactly, 7.4 or something like that. It kind of ranges from like 7 to 12 hertz. It's a very low frequency that is like the frequency of the earth, but it's also the frequency that we kind of drop into whenever we're sleeping,
Yes.
and to restore and recover and to heal. We aren't really being able to get to that place
Yeah.
because if I have like a 5G Wi-Fi box that is emitting anywhere from 30 to 300 gigahertz, 1 gigahertz is a million hertz. So the difference in frequency and speed of frequency
Mhm.
from the Wi-Fi tower, or from the Wi-Fi box, to what my body requires in order to rest and restore is
Yes.
so different
Yes.
that that communication is like confusing our cells. Our cells are electrical beings, our body's an electrical being. So
Mm.
imagine the confusion when we are constantly being bombarded with these signals that our body doesn't understand.
Everybody wants to know where to find your products. You would go to what? www.ariestech.com.
Yep, ariestech.com, AIRESTECH.com. And you have a code now. It's Tina25.
Tina 25. So everybody that puts that code in gets 25% off their order, correct?
Correct. Yes.
Awesome. I'm so excited. I think I'm going to get one for everything. And thank God I don't have that big of a house, but I think, I mean, I've got salt lamps in every room. I'm so glad that we had this conversation because I've really never gone into depth about it. And what you're saying makes perfect sense. And, Dr. Daryl Geoffrey connected us, and anything
He's
that
the
he
best.
says, I'm like, I'm in, let's go for it. So I'm so glad that he connected us. And I just can't wait for my audience to get informed about what's going on here, and get them
Yay.
all hooked up too. So
Yes.
thank
And if you guys want to learn more about actual like EMF and in the conversations I've had that I've mentioned here, it's at the Wave Forward.
the WAVE forward. That's her podcast. Yeah, I'm going to definitely
Yep.
listen to a bunch of yours too. So that's fantastic. And thank you so much for being here. And thank you, everybody, for being here. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe. And we will see you next week.